Well, greetings, imagination What a way to start. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your duke of dope discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, here with episode number 335 of Robservations, the show about something. Robcasting to you from this, the Robservatory, coming to you, you imagination connoisseurs, you people, you gentle beings that make up this, the Post-Geek singularity community. It's a glorious day, folks. It is a glorious day. Post-Oscars, apparently everyone's bitching that it is the lowest watched or the lowest ratings in Oscar history or whatever. Either way, I mean, I can't worry about that if it's the lowest rated Oscar show. I mean, who really cares? Like 25 million people, 23 million people, however many million people watched it. They'll watch clips online, whatever. I will say this about I've been watching the Oscars since I was a little kid. I love the Oscars. They're like a sacred rite of passage for me yearly, I guess. They remind me that time is passing. They also remind me about what I love, which is the art form of cinema and movies. And I like the glitz and the glamour, and I like seeing everyone's dresses and the tuxes that are being worn, and I like hearing the red carpet interviews. I love everything about the Oscars. I always have loved everything about the Oscars. And I have to say, last year I did not mind a hostless Oscars, but this year, kind of lame, ladies and gentlemen. Kind of lame. I did not like it. I think the Oscars needs a host. Last year was an interesting experiment, and I thought it worked actually pretty good. But this year, it felt very unfocused and sort of all over the place. It needed, like, I'll give you an example. I really like seeing Eminem. But you know what? There was no context for it. No one understood that when 8 Mile came out in 2002, was it 2002? That he was not allowed to perform, or they didn't have him perform his song on the Oscars. So, but it needed some context. I mean, it sort of just popped out of nowhere. You're watching this montage of movies and songs, and then the montage lingered a long time on Marshall Mathers and scenes from 8 Mile, and I'm like, okay. And then suddenly he's playing, but it was kind of a bait and switch. I didn't understand. And I like hosts of Oscars. I whether they're good or bad, there's something about them I've always liked. I love going back and watching clips of Bob Hope hosting the Oscars back in the day, because the Academy has put a lot of old clips up. I enjoy that. I think it's good. And so why not? Why not have a host? I think a host adds to the glitz and the glamour of it. I mean, they would introduce people that would then introduce people. And it was kind of weird. Although, I enjoyed seeing Kelly Marie Tran. She was adorable. She had a great dress. And I did like seeing Steve Martin and Chris Rock. I mean, there's your host team. Two former veterans of Oscar hosting veterans were there. They were funny. I liked their energy. And, but I still enjoyed the show. I thought it was a pretty good Oscars. I liked seeing who won. I thought the Parasite's win, amazing. Bong Joon-ho, everyone thought he was going to win, or Parasite was going to win Best Foreign Film, which it did, but that he took Screenplay, that he took Director, and that he took Best Film of the Year. Pretty neat. Really enjoyed seeing all of that. I was going to make some comment about how his interpreter, I'd like to see more of her, because who wouldn't, right? But she is also a filmmaker, and we're probably going to see more from her as well. So it's great. I've been a fan of Bong Joon-ho's films for a long time. If you're interested, he made a terrific police procedural film called Memories of Murder. That's definitely worth tracking down if you haven't seen it. He also made a film that, if you haven't seen, called The Host, which is about, a giant mutated monster in Korea, I guess in Seoul. Gotta check that out. He also made the post-apocalyptic science fiction film Snowpiercer, that is also worth checking out. And he made another movie called Mother. He has a very diverse filmography, and he's a world-class filmmaker, and he made Okja for Netflix. He's been a great movie maker for a long time. So it was great to see him get recognized. And I really liked seeing him, that moment where he mentioned Martin Scorsese and sort of turned all eyes onto Scorsese. And it's sort of interesting. One of the things about the Oscars is I feel like I really did think The Irishman might be my favorite movie of the year. And I thought that even before I'd seen it. And it's such a strange thing that, you know, now it's, oh, The Irishman got completely shut out, and ooh, Netflix spent all this money and they didn't win anything. They weren't taking home the gold. And I think that's such an odd thing. I think really what the Oscars do is celebrate excellence in filmmaking. It always has. And whether, we saw a lot of different kinds of people win, but and I think the messaging along with, look, for those of you who I've seen people go, well, it was virtue signaling giving Parasite the Oscar. I honestly don't think it was. I really don't think that the voting body is thinking that when they're voting. They're really thinking about the movies that they're seeing, and a lot of people, Parasite was a film that many different people enjoyed, despite the fact it was a Korean language film. I think cinema, I've grown up watching world cinema, and I've been watching cinema from all over the world my entire life, and I have never minded whether or not movies are subtitled. It makes no difference to me, and I was lucky that I grew up in Seattle, and Dan Ireland, rest in peace, may he rest in peace, one half of the duo that started the Seattle International Film Festival, allowed me to see from the time the first time I went to the Seattle International Film Festival was in 1980, and I grew up watching all kinds of movies, and I was never afraid of movies that were not in English or that were subtitled. I had no problem with that, and it was great to see. This was the first time a non-English language movie won Best Picture, and it was the first time the Best Foreign Film also won Best Picture, and that was crazy. And also Bong Joon-ho tied Walt Disney for winning the most awards in one night. He won 4, tying Walt Disney's record. So I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it immensely. So, I think one thing 2019 proved is that world cinema, all cinema is still one of our most vibrant forms of entertainment, certainly one of our most vibrant art forms, and I still think it is the best way to convey information to people. Because as I've said so many times before, how many art forms or how many forms of communication at all can get disparate people from all walks of life into the same room where they're all sitting next to each other. They might have all kinds of differing ideologies or political views or whatever. They're all sitting together. The lights come down and they shut up. Well, hopefully they shut up and don't look at their phones. And they look at the screen for an hour and a half or 2 hours, or in the case of The Irishman, 3.5 hours. And they watch what's being presented to them with an open mind. And I think cinema is incredibly important, and whether movies are going to be streaming or however you're getting them, it's great that so many great movies are still being made with such a variety of subject matter and allowing all kinds of voices to be heard. One thing that I found out last night that I would like to acknowledge, in the in memoriam section, one of my professors, I guess I don't know if you'd call her a professor, but she was, one of my professors when I was in college, when I was at the Evergreen State College before I transferred to USC, Barbara Hammer. She was a world-renowned lesbian filmmaker, and she had made a lot of great movies. She was a professor of mine at the Evergreen State College, and she and I did not really get along very well. Now, I always respected her movies, but I thought as a professor, she allowed her politics to frequently get in the way of, let's just say, student relations. But I did learn a lot from her, and I really enjoyed being in class with her. And while her movies, sometimes didn't always hit the mark for me, I will say that I was sorry to find out. I didn't know that she had passed away, and I was glad that I did get to experience some time learning from someone who actually made some quality documentaries and some amazing experimental films. And I was sorry to find out that she passed away. But I will say this. I'm going to say this about her, because I'm going to get the last word on this, Barbara. When I was the reason that I ended up transferring to USC early was at the Evergreen State College, you can design your own curriculum. And for my senior year, I had got into USC, and I was deciding, should I wait and do my senior year at Evergreen, or should I go to USC? And she had to approve my senior year project. And I had written a short film, a half-an-hour short that I was going to make called Sentimental Value, that was basically about a man who would go to funerals and pretend to know the people who died to obtain their belongings, and wound up haunted by the spirits of those people. And I gave her my script because she had to approve it. She just flipped the pages in front of me. She closed it and she said, "I'm not going to approve this project. It's too Hollywood. It's too commercial." And she hadn't read a word of it, but she knew me and our dealings in class. And that's what made me decide to go to California. So there you go. But it was a bummer to find out that she'd passed away, because she did do a lot of work, and I did enjoy being in class with her. It's just we butted heads. I don't think she actually gave me a chance, really. I think she pegged me as being a certain kind of a person, even though I always disagreed with her assessment of me. But anyway, so rest in peace, Barbara Hammer. I do remember you, and I did enjoy being in class and being taught by you. Anyway, so over the weekend, one of the things that I also did, I think one of my most eagerly awaited movies, certainly, actually it is my most eagerly awaited movie of this year, is Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's 1965 science fiction novel, Dune, with one of the most incredible casts assembled. Timothée Chalamet is playing Paul Atreides, who I think is fantastic casting. Well, I've been curious about Dune. Like, what were they going to do? This will be the third time that Dune has been adapted for the screen. The first was famously in 1984, David Lynch's adaptation of the film, 19 years after the book was published. And there are 6 original Dune novels written by Frank Herbert. There's Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House Dune. So there are 6 original novels in Frank Herbert's Dune canon. And then, of course, Kevin G. Anderson and Brian Herbert, his son, have taken on the mantle and decided to write more Dune novels, like the Butlerian Jihad, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I've not read their novels. I've only read the 6 canonical Frank Herbert Dune books. And I do think that Dune was one of the greatest science fiction novels I've ever read. Now, Dune is it's different than you might believe. There are in-universe appendices, and there's, in a way, kind of a little bit like Tolkien did. There are there's like notes, like Princess Irulan's, her writings. It's very interesting. It's not necessarily just your straight ahead narrative, and a lot of Dune takes place in characters' heads and things like that. And it's one of the great science fiction novels ever written, I think. And the whole Dune series is very unique. And for those of you who might not know what Dune is about, first of all, I'm not going to spoil. I'm just going to give you an overview of Dune. I don't think the book series began in 1965. I don't think it's wrong of me to discuss something that has been adapted twice already. Once for television in 2000, and by the way, then I think it was 2003. They did in 2000 there was a TV miniseries, and then in 2003, then they adapted Dune Messiah and Children of Dune in another miniseries, and then of course David Lynch's Dune. So basically, Dune is set thousands and thousands and thousands of years in the future, where humanity has conquered the galaxy. And basically what's happened is, in that time, a feudal governmental system has arisen. And about 10,000 years before the story starts, there was, and this is why I say that the makers of current Star Trek have been pillaging Dune since Discovery aired, and not necessarily in the most subtle way. But 10,000 years before the story, there was an uprising. I think the Butlerian Jihad is what it was called, where all machines, all robots, and any machines that were made in the image of man, or any kind of computers, there was an uprising where they rose up against man, and there was a massive conflict, and humanity won, but outlawed all machines. There are no robots or anything. And by the way, in the Dune universe, there's not really any alien life, with a few exceptions. But so what's happened is, in the universe, they discovered on a planet Arrakis, or Dune, a substance. So the Dune is a planet, it's a place. They discovered a substance called spice, the spice melange. And this spice, if you don't know where it comes from, I don't want to get into that because it's all part of it. I don't want to spoil it all, but I'm just setting up the world for you. So this spice is used for a number of things. First of all, human beings, it prolongs life. Well, that spice has basically been used to create 3 different superhuman species of mankind. One is the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. And the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood has psychic powers. They can sense things. They're precogs. They also are able to use the voice, a special voice where they can actually control you. If they tell you to do something, you're powerless to not do it. And the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood basically manipulates bloodlines through all the royal families, all the houses of the Landsraad. Those are all the houses that run everything. And they manipulate bloodlines. They manipulate leaders. And what they're trying to eventually do is create the Kwisatz Haderach, the super being, through the manipulation of bloodlines. And that way they would control this super being, who there's lots of prophecies and all that. And so they're a big part of it. Then there are the Mentats, and they are human computers. And they have used spice to basically, because we don't have real computers anymore, they basically they can do massive computations. They also can see what's going to happen based on predictability and the outcome of situations, which are constantly shifting. And so there are the Mentats, and then there are the Spacing Guild and the Guild Navigators that are literally, they've taken so much spice that they've mutated into different beings. I guess you call it different species, but still human. But they turn into they don't look human, really human anymore. In the David Lynch movie, they look like giant shrimp, I guess. And they have the ability to fold space, so you can transport from one place to another. And the way that they control movement around the universe is that they have these massive spaceships called Highliners, Guild Highliners, where another group can put all of their smaller spaceships into these massive ships. And then those are controlled by the Spacing Guild, and then those massive ships will take you and all of your spaceships from planet to planet to planet. So these 3 factions are all they all rely, the universe relies on these 3 factions to continue. Now, the galaxy is presided over by the Emperor. And at the time of Dune, the Emperor, Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. And obviously all these people want to stay in power. And the whole thing about Dune is it all reflects back into our systems of government and religious beliefs that we have here on Earth. Everything is analogous, like in all good science fiction, to what's going on today. So when Dune begins, there are 2 houses, fiefdoms, that have been, they have declared their hatred for one another. It goes back decades, if not centuries. So you have the House Harkonnen and the House Atreides. And they hate each other. And they're constantly messing with each other however they can. And the House Harkonnen's homeworld is Gidi Prime. And the House Atreides' homeworld is Caladan, where they've been for many, many generations. Caladan is a beautiful world full of oceans and rich, lush vegetation. It's a beautiful planet. And of course, Giedi Prime is a nasty, horrible place. The Harkonnens are bad. They're assholes. And currently, when Dune opens, the Harkonnens are running the planet Dune. Now, the whole thing about Dune is Dune and the spice that comes from Dune literally makes the universe go round. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood needs it. The Spacing Guild needs it to keep mutating themselves to become third stage guild navigators so they can fold space, which means the whole galaxy's economy depends on them to be able to fold space. And then, of course, you have the Mentats, who also need spice to free their minds and become the human computers that they are. And then spice is used to just extend life. Spice is highly addictive. There's all kinds of stuff. So anyway, spice is what makes the universe go round. And currently, when Dune starts, the Harkonnens run Arrakis. They run Arrakis. They run Dune. So their job is to mine spice and make sure that it gets distributed throughout the galaxy. And it is incredibly lucrative. It's the most lucrative thing in the world, in the universe. So the Harkonnens are sitting pretty, and they enjoy it. Well, in the beginning of the story, Dune, the Harkonnens are basically in league with the Padishah Emperor to get rid of the Atreides. They want to get rid of the Atreides because the leader of House Atreides, Duke Leto Atreides, is basically a really good guy. He's a good dude, and everyone likes him. And he has the ability to unite people. He's generally a pretty good guy at heart. And he threatens Shaddam IV, the Padishah Emperor's rule of the galaxy. He sees Duke Leto Atreides as being a threat to his power base. So, and the Harkonnens hate the Atreides too. So, hey, why not figure out a way to get rid of them? And so there's a lot of, it's very Game of Thrones, political machinations, plans within plans, and all kinds of stuff. So as Dune begins, the story of Dune begins, the Atreides, House Atreides, is being given oversight. They're basically being given control of Arrakis, which means that the entire Atreides clan, the family, they're leaving their ancestral world of Caladan, and they have to move to Dune. Now, which isn't necessarily a great thing. And the problem with Dune is that it is the most inhospitable place in the world to live, in the universe. It's hot. There is vegetation and things on Dune. There is an ecosystem there beyond which most people know. So Dune has a lot of secrets, and one of the secrets it has is it does have basically an indigenous people, the Fremen. But people think there's not very many Fremen, and they're able to live in the desert with they have this incredible technology called still suits, which are literally suits that you wear that reclaim all of your sweat, all of your urine, all of your feces, any breath you expend, and it recycles it so you can actually live in the desert for weeks at a time if you have a still suit. The still suit is a big deal in the story. So I'm not going to get a lot more into the story of Dune because I don't want to take away from anyone's enjoyment. But basically the story of Dune is, again, you're dealing with politics, you're dealing with religion, you're dealing with philosophy, you're dealing with warring houses, you're dealing with a plot. It's very, if somebody were to ask me to describe Dune, it has elements of The Godfather, in that there are the five families, the families of the Landsraad, and there's one guy who sits at the head of the table, and there's machinations going on, and basically the Corleone family was like, they were the good guys. Well, the Atreides are basically the good guys, even though I wouldn't necessarily call anyone in Dune good. But what happens is, so Duke Leto has a concubine, or his wife, who he loves, Jessica, Lady Jessica, and she is one of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. And, of course, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, or sometimes they're called witches, or whatever you want to call them, they are often, because it's a sisterhood, they're often with men of power, so they can help manipulate and oversee what's going on. That is their way. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood stays in the background, but they almost are sort of like a de facto. They're really pushing and maneuvering things all the time. And Duke Leto and Jessica have had a son who in Dune is 16 years old, Paul Atreides. And Jessica was supposed to bear Duke Leto a daughter, but defied the order and had a son anyway. And whether or not, and the son he has abilities, he's been trained as the ultimate heir to Duke Leto's throne, and of course they're surrounded. The whole Atreides clan. There's warriors and weapons masters. They have their own mentat, Thufir Hawat, and they've got characters like Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho, who's being played by Jason Momoa, who's kind of this badass. So anyway, that said, one of the problems with Dune is it's a very difficult story to adapt because it doesn't necessarily have a lot happens. A lot happens. But it's also a lot of talking and posturing and thinking and philosophizing. And a lot of the time, these giant events are occurring and you're getting people's opinions about what's happening. Like you're hearing their thoughts in their head, you're seeing these things through their eyes, but it's not exactly as plot driven as you would think it is, even though there's a big plot happening. Anyway, so over the weekend, I read a draft of the Dune screenplay for the upcoming, it opens in December of this year, Denis Villeneuve's Dune. And it has 3 credited writers. John Spates has done these revisions, and of course, it is a September 2018 draft. And Eric Roth and Denis Villeneuve wrote the script, and then John Spates came in and did revisions. Now, John Spates, I'm a huge fan of the work that John Spates has done. He originally wrote the draft for Alien Engineers that inexplicably Damon Lindelof came in and sort of rewrote. I have his draft. I have John Spates' original draft of Alien Engineers, and I quite enjoy it. I'm a big fan of John Spates' work, and I was very curious to see, obviously, what is this script like? How are they going to adapt the book? And one of the things that the criticism of David Lynch's Dune is there's so much in the story that how do you adapt this book into a movie? Well, I've heard, and people have talked about, well, it's the first half of the book, or what is it? But I haven't read any true confirmation. Let me state for the record right now, this movie is the first half of Dune. It is not the last half of Dune. It is the first half of Dune. Now, I was pretty overjoyed, and this script is fantastic. It is a fantastic adaptation of the source material. For those of you who are familiar with Dune, the original David Lynch Dune, one of the problems with the original Dune was the visual effects were just not up to par. And one of the things that, if you have any cursory understanding of Dune, one of the things that you know about are the giant sandworms that live in the desert. Dune is a very dangerous place because if you're out in the desert, there are these giant, what are called sandworms, and they're hundreds of meters long. They're huge. They're like, imagine they're like Japanese monsters, but they're like kaiju, but they're giant worms that live in the sands of Arrakis. And our characters, human beings, they do interact with these creatures, and these creatures are attracted to vibration. So if you're rhythmically walking through the sand, they'll come get you. So even the people in the sand, they have to, like the Fremen know how they can't walk normally. They have to walk strangely, so it's not rhythmic, so they don't attract worms. And one of the things that they do on this planet, and what the Harkonnens are overseeing, and what now the Atreides are going to oversee, is spice mining. And how they mine spice is literally they have these these sort of these refineries, these spice mining vehicles that literally mine the spice out of the sand contains the spice, basically. The surface is where the spice is. And then what happens is there are what are called ornithopters. Ornithopters are flying machines that literally they flap wings like they're insects or birds. That's how they fly. And in things like the original David Lynch version, they didn't have any good way to do this. So the ornithopters didn't look so great, even though ornithopters are a big part of the ecology of Dune and how they work and all that. But the visual effects just weren't up to par. And the first thing anybody would ask if they've read Dune is, well, how are they going to make the sandworms look? Well, now, even since 2000, with the effects technology that will exist, I can't even imagine how it's going to look amazing. It's going to look incredible. And there's a scene that's been around. I think this is the third adaptation to use it. There is a scene pretty similar. The script, by the way, this script is very similar in terms of structure to the David Lynch Dune. Very similar. Now, I know Denis Villeneuve has talked about how he's very influenced by the look of the original Lynch version, and I did too. I loved the still suits, and I loved a lot of the design work, and he's talked about making it more brutalist, which I think is great. But with the visual effects available, they'll be able to create like the ornithopters and things like that. And there is a scene early on in the movie where Duke Leto there is a one of these spice mining devices ends up getting destroyed, and Duke Leto ends up saving a number of people, which curries favor amongst the locals and amongst the people that live on Arrakis to show that he's a pretty good guy. Well, so the structure of the movie is similar to how, I mean, obviously because it's based on the book. So where do you go? But one of the things that by far exceeds what we saw in David Lynch's version and the 2000 television version is this version of Dune is it completely expands all of the characters, and you learn far more about the world of Dune, the universe of Dune, and you really get a sense of like what's happening is there is an immediacy to what's going on. And it very much felt more along the lines of a Game of Thrones, where you really got involved in these characters. They're really fleshed out, and you learn a lot more about the world than we have in any previous adaptation of Dune, which makes sense because Dune is such a beloved and seminal piece of work. And I was really taken aback just how deep it goes and how they just do a wonderful job here. I mean, these are all three of these guys did a fantastic job on this script. And you really get a sense of, because there's all this terminology and they really help you. They bring you into the world. And it's very interesting because if you've seen the first Dune, David Lynch's Dune, Princess Irulan, played by Virginia Madsen, basically gives you an overview of the world of Dune, but she's kind of floating in space, and it's a lot of information to take in, and I don't know if it really worked, but I think they've taken a page. When they were writing this, it's like, okay, well, how are we we have to do this info dump in the beginning because an audience needs to have the world set up for them. Well, what movie has come out since 1984 that does a fantastic job in a very short period of time setting up a world for you? Lord of the Rings. Well, this, taking a page from both, I think, Lord of the Rings and a little bit of Man of Steel, the moment when there's the mosaic on the wall that's being explained. The script opens with Reverend Mother Mohaim. She was played by Sean Phillips, the great Sean Phillips in the David Lynch version. It opens with her explaining, and she's sort of the leader of the Bene Gesserit, and there's like this it's like on their temple wall, this mosaic that moves, and I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm sure it's going to be visually very interesting. That sets up the entire universe for you. And I thought that was a great way, because look at they did the same thing in the David Lynch version. They just didn't have really the way to visualize it that they probably should have. And this version does that, but with the Reverend Mother Mohayim. But interestingly enough, and I'll tell you flat out, what you don't see in this version of the script that I thought was a great choice is you really don't meet the Padishah Emperor or the Spacing Guild or any of those people. Jose Ferrer played the Emperor in David Lynch's version. They don't even deal with that. They really concentrate this story. You're really seeing it from mostly the Atreides family and the Harkonnens. And it really concentrates on the conflict between the two of them and the machinations and what's going on. And you learn a lot more about the Bene Gesserit, and you've got the Mentats. There are Mentats on either side they feel that they're rivals with one another. So they did a fantastic job setting up this world and really making the conflict more about people. And I think there was a choice. I'm sure they had to sit down and go, okay, in the world that we live in now, viewers are much more savvy about world building, and whether it's Lord of the Rings and I'm convinced this, because of Lord of the Rings and because of Game of Thrones, this feels more along those lines than anything else. And both Thrones and Lord of the Rings deal with different factions, different races, and in case you've got of course the elves and the dwarves and the hobbits and the world of men. So audiences now, especially movie-going audiences, understand these things. There's a shorthand people can now buy into, and they get what's happening. So as complicated as this story is, they've really done a good job by focus on the relationship, first of all, that Jessica has with her son, Paul, and then, of course, the relationship that Paul has with everyone else that's a part of the Atreides clan, those that have to train him. And you see all this in the David Lynch version, but it was very cursory, and it wasn't nearly as organic as it feels here. The Lynch version, I actually like the Lynch version. It came out in Christmas of 1984, the same Christmas that 2010 came out. So we had these two big epic science fiction movies opening. But this feels, it's not as they've really done a good job bringing all these characters to bear and their interactions, and it's really, really, really well done. And it's very adult, and they go for it, man. This is a very adult. This is not dumbed down. They have not thrown in superfluous action scenes to sort of hold people's attention. This is a really, really adult and very, very studious adaptation of the source material. And I loved it. I loved all the characters. In the Dune version that Lynch made, you didn't get a sense of like, what did Duncan Idaho do? What did Gurney Halleck do? Thufir Hawat do? You didn't understand. I mean, you kind of did. Now you really understand who all of these people are, what their roles are, what goes on, and how this house works. And now it's funny because there's elements of everything. There's elements of things like The Crown, even when you're dealing with royalty and you're dealing with how the machinations of what people want. And one of the other things that I thought was also incredible is when the Atreides arrive on Arrakis, it was, again, you didn't really get a sense of what is Arrakis, who's there, and why. All of that is dealt with here. You really understand what's at stake, and it's basically, if you had somebody from if you had a family living in the eastern United States, like Massachusetts, and they were one of the most powerful families on earth, and they basically had to go to some town in the Sahara Desert and take it over, and there was all those people that are already there. That's kind of what it would be like. And there is a lot of analogies to Earth religions and Earth peoples, and it's not lost on anyone that Dune, there is a lot of, I mean, things are called jihads after all, that there is a lot of Islam in what's going on here, which makes it all cool. I mean, I always liked that. Even when I first read Dune, I think I was probably like in the 5th grade when I first read Dune, and they do a really good job of this. And also, you really get an idea how, like, one of the things that the Bene Gesserit does is for populations that maybe aren't as, let's call them the third world populations, the Bene Gesserit sisterhood makes up, well, as they would say in Picard, makes up mythological structures. They literally make up prophecies, and they inject them into lesser populations to make them believe what they want them to believe, so they can manipulate the bloodlines of those planets. And so it's when the Atreides arrive, the people that live in Arrakeen, the capital city of Arrakis, they're all ready. You know, there's a mystique around the Atreides family, and they play into that. And then, of course, the Fremen, the population, the people holding all the secrets in Dune are looking at their new masters and overlords. They're not trustworthy. They don't believe them. And so there's a lot of trust and things that have to be earned. But as we all know, and as much as I'll talk about the plot, all of this, the Atreides clan coming to Arrakis, is all one big trap that the Harkonnens and the Padishah Emperor have engineered. Shaddam IV thinks he can get rid of Duke Leto, and his major rival that could someday, he could see Leto as emperor, and the Harkonnens have a blood feud with the Atreides, and they want to get rid of them because they're just gonna take over. They're in cahoots with the emperor, and they're gonna take back over Arrakis so they can continue doing what they did and make all that money selling spice, because anybody who's at the administration of Arrakis, they make a lot of money. So that's where we're at. That's the storyline. And then it unfolds very faithfully to the book. And they spend a lot more time developing the Fremen population. And what ends up happening in the story is that Paul Atreides, because Lady Jessica was not supposed to bear a male heir, everyone begins to wonder if Paul Atreides is in fact the Kwisatz Haderach, the super being that the Bene Gesserit sisterhood has been manipulating bloodlines for decades and centuries to create. And hopefully, well, they hoped she would be a woman, but it looks like Paul Atreides might be this being that is going to basically deliver the galaxy to salvation. And what's really interesting about Dune, and a lot of people think that, who've only read, say, the first book, think that Paul Atreides is the hero of the story. He is the hero of Dune. But as the story moves on into the other books, clearly, let's just say being a hero is not all it's cut out to be. And as the Dune saga unfolds, and by the way, the 6 books unfold over thousands of years, Paul Atreides, he's pretty much responsible. He might be the worst despot in the entire universe who ever lived. But I won't get into that. It's not part of the story now. As I said, what I found most interesting about the script is it is indeed half the story, half the original novel. And it ends pretty much around the halfway point, I would say. But what I found really interesting about it is the story gets really huge at the end of Dune. There is it leads up to, like, the Battle of Pelennor Fields, the battle at the end of Return of the King. There's a similar large scale battle. They don't deal with any of that in this script. This is all really it's really a deep dive, really turning the screws to studying all of these different factions. What do they want? What is happening? Who are these people? And I really, really loved, I mean, they just get really, really in depth and really examined, unlike we've ever seen examined before. I mean, they did a pretty good job in the 2000 miniseries. They did. But it was very theatrical. They didn't have the budget, so they basically almost made it look like a play at certain points. But this to me is very heady. It is very intellectual. It is, it is certainly not an action extravaganza, although there are a lot of action scenes in it. But it is much more along the lines of The Godfather. It really is, or Lord of the Rings. And this really did remind me of Fellowship of the Ring. The way when it ends, you feel like this was a very satisfying movie, but I can't wait to see the next part because it's all obviously leading up to something. And the cast, and I can only imagine, we've seen nothing from this movie. There's been no trailer. They've only reported that Denis Villeneuve is sort of leaning on what he really liked about the Lynch version, because there's a lot to like about the Lynch version. But judging from the script, the worlds that they're going to show us are probably going to be unlike, even though we've seen Dune on the big screen before, the way that this was written, it's very much, it really did. That's what when I was reading it, it really reminded me of The Godfather. It really did. And I thought that was sort of interesting. Because it was all, the fun stuff is all of the character interplay and what's happening and the mystery of Dune and the Fremen and all the different factions and the characters. I mean, I will say this. I loved when the Guild Navigator shows up in the original Dune, in Lynch's Dune, and talks to Jose Ferrer. Many machines on Ix. We see you behind it. I mean, all that. I love that scene, and I loved seeing. You don't see any of that because it detracted. I mean, one of the problems with Dune is how do you fashion a straightforward narrative and pack everything in there? Well, the fact is they didn't deal so much with the Padishah Emperor and the Spacing Guild now because that would take away from the thrust of the story. And from the very beginning of the movie, it is the story of Paul Atreides. And they stick with that. I'm not saying we don't leave those places. We do go other places. We do see other things. There's a lot of interesting things that were not in either one of the adaptations that are really interesting. There's one thing that happened that I'm not going to talk about, that I wondered if they made it up for. It's just been so long since I've read the original Dune, but I loved it. It was a welcome addition to this. It was an extra added action beat, which I thought was really good. But this, first of all, you realize as I was reading the script, I'm like, wow, whatever they're going to talk about synthetics, between the spore drive and the uprising of the synthetics on Picard. I mean, it's either Michael Chabon or Akiva Goldsman. The modern Star Trek has definitely took a lot of inspiration from Dune. But I really love this script, and to know that it's already been made. It's already shot. I just cannot wait. I cannot wait. All of my hopes for this movie, reading this script, have been realized. All of them. I couldn't ask for a better cast. I couldn't ask for a better adaptation, and the tone and the seriousness by which they've approached this. You couldn't ask for something better. And I think I'm always talking about on this show how I love that we live in this world of these great literary adaptations. We're getting The Expanse, where there's a fealty to the original source material. Well, that is very apparent here. I only hope, man, I would love it. My only worry, my only trepidation with this whole project is I wonder, like with Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, which I think are two of the finest science fiction movies, certainly of the last 20 years. But I wonder if people that are audiences that are more accustomed to big action, whether they will be as accepting of this. I would love this movie to be a worldwide billion-dollar hit, and I think it will be, but it really depends on the execution. You know, when you read a screenplay, it's a blueprint. And I loved all the dialogue. I loved all the scenes. I love how they set everything up. But again, it's really, and I believe in Denis Villeneuve's execution, because a lot of what we're gonna get here is the feeling of what's happening. And man, Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen. I just, knowing who's playing all of these roles, the film is so impeccably cast that, you know, I was reading the script, I was seeing all these people in the roles. And I'm like, man, this is what's up. And I hope, I mean, it would be, one of the things I don't know is, did they shoot Dune 1 and 2 together? Or are they expecting to get everybody to, like, if they didn't make this movie, I know they've made 2 films, but man, I would have, this is only the first half. I don't know. I mean, I would hope that this movie's a big enough hit that I can't imagine. I don't know why they wouldn't have filmed the entire book. But yes, this is definitely just the first half. And I'm like, man, God, I want this movie to be successful. But this movie is by far my most eagerly awaited film of this year. I don't think I've been as excited to see a movie like this in a long time. And reading the script has only made my enthusiasm jump 10,000-fold. The year is 10,191, right? But yeah, what we're getting with this is phenomenal. And I think that, I don't know, let me reiterate that I am hugely excited for this. And I'm more excited than ever because, you know, there's other movies, like I've talked about how I wanted to adapt this book, Way Station, that Matt Reeves company. If people are going to go back into the great canonical works of science fiction from our past, as long as they're getting this kind of treatment, I mean, this is A-list all the way, and it's just very, very, very exciting. Anyway, I'm beating a dead horse. Let's see what anybody has to say. I mean, I did not go on yesterday, so there's a few super chats and tips I want to get to, and I'll answer any questions about the script that you want, but I'm not going to, other than what is already known, I won't get into specifics. So let's see. We have here, you know what, I think I'm going to put on my glasses. I hope nobody minds. Thank you very much. My cheap ass. Wait a minute. Why did I just do that? I just, well, that wasn't good. Sorry about that. Screwing that one up. Let me fix this quickly. I didn't mean to do that. So, well, here, I'll just get to it anyway. You can't see as much. Let's see. I'm going back down to yesterday. There was a few people that I didn't get to. And the first being Anonymous here. Anonymous says, but don't you get tired of seeing the same talent making movies all the time when others deserve a chance? Life could be fair and equal. You know, I got this. This Anonymous wrote this a couple times. Life isn't fair and equal. And making movies is really, really, really hard. And the reason why the same talent is making movies, it's just, that's like saying, shouldn't everybody get to play in the NBA or the NFL? No. I mean, I not everyone else deserves a chance. Only the people that have worked hard enough and know enough and are talented enough to make movies at that level should get a chance. I don't believe that everybody should get a chance to do everything they want, because a lot of people don't have the ability. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Suthius sent in a tip and said, hey, Mr. B, I tend not to comment or debate on a topic on a Facebook comment thread. The reason? When you have grown-ass adults telling you to basically be an oral vacuum instead of debating you on the matter at hand. It's frustrating and sad. I don't like people. Well, Suthius, I understand where you're coming from. But, you know, as I said, this channel is all about sharing ideas. And everybody's welcome to share ideas here. And I think healthy debate is good. Look, I on my own comment threads, I'm often insulted. I was called a creepy old man and said that I don't know anything. And I was even, somebody said they can't make, somebody was accusing me of, you can't make movies on iPhones. Of course, I linked to an article about all the movies that have been made on iPhones, but you know, you got to take the good with the bad. That's what people are like. And I like people. Raymond Verada sent in a tip and said, it's great that Sun Kang's character Han in the Fast Saga is the same character from Better Luck Tomorrow, which he is. For those of you who don't know, Sun Kang's character Han was introduced in Justin Lin's early movie Better Luck Tomorrow as the character of Han. And I think it's great that he was able to do that. I noticed Jason Tobin, the Enfuego car maker, is also from the same movie. Too bad he couldn't play the same guy. I know, right? It's pretty exciting. It's nice that you noticed that. Sam O'Neill sent in a super chat and said, holy hell, the new Star Wars documentary on Disney Plus is bloody brilliant. A must watch. I haven't seen it. I didn't know there was a new documentary. Are you sure it's not an old documentary? I'm going to take your word for it. I'll go check it out. Willow Yang said, I was listening to the best movie, worst movie episode for 2019 movies. So you've watched The Fanatic. I have it on Netflix right now, and I'm debating on whether I should see it. I heard the movie is so crazy that it's kind of fun. Do you agree? Okay, for those of you who don't know, there's a movie that Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit directed, starring John Travolta, called The Fanatic. Do I recommend it? It was my pick for the worst movie of last year, and admittedly, I didn't see all the movies that came out last year, but it's I understand where it was coming from. It's about a fanatical fan of a certain Hollywood personality, and in his quest to connect with that Hollywood personality, things go, let's just say, awry. Now, I would say that John Travolta does give his all to the performance. I just thought that the execution was not good. But that said, Willow, it is kind of fun. It is kind of fun, but it is incredibly bad. I don't know if I can recommend it. I think it's an interesting anomaly, and when you watch it, you can see how I think all of the best intentions aren't necessarily, it's not good. I don't know if it's fun or not. I mean, it is like watching a car crash in slow motion, I will say that. And I will say this, John Travolta does give a really committed performance, and for that alone, he should be lauded. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough. Jeffrey Mao sent in a tip and said, give it up for Star Wars Theory. He's making part 2 of his Vader fan film. He's directing it himself. He made the first good decision to get a good AD. I believe it's the same AD on the first film, but he's casting for about 10 Jedi. Mace lives. Well, that's cool. I like that Vader film. I like what Star Wars Theory did. That Vader film is really cool. I recommend anybody check it out if you're a Star Wars fan. That's neat that he's doing it. Good for him. Journey's End sent in a super chat and said, hey, Rob, I was the guy who tweeted you the Michael Chabon Instagram post yesterday. What are your thoughts on how he addressed Picard's criticisms? So Michael Chabon was speaking at, I don't know if it was the Television Critics. There were people that were asking him things about why is there smoking on Picard, and why do people swear, and all of that. And he was giving answers that I found, okay, they're fine. But here's what I think really bothered me the most about what he was saying. Star Trek, as we've all often talked about, is a period piece of the future. And while it allegorically reflects our time today, you know, I think a lot of the modern colloquialisms like vaping, first of all, if you're going to take some kind of a drug in the 23rd or 24th century, like when Picard takes place, what do people 400 years from now do? Would they still vape? Or smoke cigars? I mean, really? I would think that, give us the 24th century equivalent of that. Come up with something unique that we haven't seen before. I mean, even vaping and even smoking, how is that going to work in 400 years? And I feel that when I see all these colloquialisms that it's just lazy. We're going to make somebody chomp cigars like George Papard as Cowboy in Battle Beyond the Stars. I'm like, come on, man. You know, I wasn't I wasn't buying it. I wasn't buying it. But I mean, I understand where he's coming from. I like that he had answers for those things, but I just thought that it didn't make me. I didn't find it very endearing. But okay. At least he was answering those questions. By the way, I want to thank you for sending that to me because it was interesting to watch. Attic Hatch Sound sent in a super chat. I have another title for you, Mr. B. The Sci-Fi Sommelier. Oh, I'm using that. The Sci-Fi Sommelier. I love that. That's very funny. That's... Magic K sent in a tip, said, famous manga My Hero Academia's creator recently created a character, Shinga Maruta, which name was inferred to victims from Unit 731's inhuman biochemical experience during World War II that drew a lot of backlash from Korea and China. Then the creator and publisher made an apology. Later, the creator renamed that character to Kudai Kuraki, which was to infer the infamous human experience that was done to American pilots by Kyushu University during World War II. What's your opinion on this ignorance? Well, for those of you, Unit 731, during World War II, the Japanese did some truly monstrously horrific things. Like the Nazis, they engaged in human experiments. They did absolutely horrible things. The rape of Nanking, the Chinese are very aware. And I think, I think the problem that we have today is because as we move further and further away from atrocity, it's easier for people to forget about it because they themselves have moved further and further away from these atrocities, and it's not been a part of their experience. And I don't think it's truly understood how monstrous human beings. World War II, what went on in World War II, I can't even fathom, in the case of both of these instances, what that was like. The idea that one human being could dehumanize another human being so far that they have no problem experimenting, inflicting horrific pain onto another human being. I can't even imagine inflicting pain on animals myself, but I think that kind of ignorance is really tone deaf. And I think, the problem is by normalizing or making the atrocities that occurred trivial, because people can't really, I know it's very hard for human beings to put themselves in the mindset of something that happened 70 years ago. But I grew up, a Jew. I met concentration camp survivors every year. Multiple times a year when I was going to Sunday school growing up. And when you heard these stories, it was very, very difficult to believe. And now there are very few people left that were survivors. I mean, the Shoah Foundation has documented a lot of survivors' stories, but, there's a lot of Holocaust deniers out there, which is silly considering if there's one thing the Nazis did extremely well, they're very efficient, and they recorded all of this. The Samuel Wiesenthal Center, there is a museum here in Los Angeles where when you go through it, you're given a card of a person and you chart their journey through what happened to them during World War II and whether they lived or they died. And the whole thing was monstrous. And what went on with the Japanese and the Germans and the dehumanization of people. And it's gone on. I mean, our human history is full of that. American history is full of that. Whether it was the lynchings in the South of Black Americans, whether it's what we did to the indigenous people here. I mean, how far back do you want to go? There's nobody better than inflicting horrors and pain on human beings than other human beings. And I think that's monstrous. Terrible. Calvin Bowles sent in a super chat saying, how does Disney make money by telling theaters they can't play a movie like Sound of Music when they can get movie rentals from it? Do they want us to never see a movie like that on the screen again? Well, Calvin, it's a good point. But the thing is, Disney, they own those movies. And unfortunately, there's nothing, we can't tell Disney how they should run their business. And I agree with you. I mean, I want to be able to see those movies as well. But now Disney owns the Fox library, whether it's Sound of Music, whether it's Rocky Horror, and they want to protect their copyrights and they want to protect their IP that they spent a lot of money to acquire. So I get it. But, we also live in this world. I mean, they can't, look, from a business standpoint, they can't allow things to, they can't be lackadaisical about protecting their IP. And I understand that. But I do think that it's unfortunate. They need to come up with a plan to allow these things to occur. And I mean, a lot of people, they have films now in their library exponentially that people are going to want to see more of in the theaters, whether it's the Alien franchise or the Predator franchise or Rocky Horror or Fight Club or any number of films that people want to see on retrospectives and show. I hope Disney does make it easier for people to do that. But the thing is, they don't make that much money. It's they give a film to a theater, unless the theater is going to run a retrospective for a long period of time. It's not necessarily economically feasible or even desirable for them. I mean, I would hope it would be, but they don't make that much money. It's kind of a bummer. Stubble McShave says that Dune is one of the best third omniscient point of view books, and The Spice is a great example of interconnecting the magic into the politics and the economy of a world. I couldn't agree with you more, Stubble. I mean, like I was saying, you have these huge, they're huge action set pieces in Dune, but some of the time you're like in a character's head, and you're getting their thoughts about these incredible events that are taking place. You're not like in it. They're not explaining the plot. You're not experiencing the plot. You're experiencing what's happening through another person's point of view. It's sort of it's interesting, but I think it is one of the best third person omniscient point of view books. I completely agree with you there. Greedo sent in a tip and says, Betty Davis said actors should stay out of politics. I agree. It's just virtue signaling. I say that as a gay man grossly underrepresented. These people sacrifice nothing. Give up your own roles and nominations or stop lecturing. I watch to escape. I disagree with that, because who are politicians after all? They're us. I mean, I know we talk about career politicians, but, I think actors, especially, you have a lot of actors who are involved in different causes, and when somebody is visible, look, I understand, even me, I'm not immune to the power of celebrity. I've told the story about the one time I met Tom Cruise. It was just me in a room with a few other people, and Tom Cruise came in with Katie Holmes and Surrey, and we ended up having to wait an hour for anybody else to show up. So there was just us, and I started talking to Tom Cruise. But when Tom Cruise walked in the room, even though I'm taller than him, you felt it, man. You feel that celebrities have power, and that's not to say, like someone like George Clooney or Matt Damon, they're involved in a lot of causes, and perhaps I don't think necessarily an award show is perhaps the best place where you can actually present your platform in a well thought out place. But, I think every single person should be curious or worried or involved in the world around them, no matter what you do. I don't think just celebrities, I think anybody. We're all involved. We should all be involved in politics. I really believe that. And, as you say yourself, you're a gay man grossly underrepresented. So when a movie is made, say, like Philadelphia, when Jonathan Demme makes a movie like Philadelphia, which at the time you had two major actors. You had Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks playing a gay man who was suffering the ravages of AIDS. That's important. And I think that's that Jonathan Demme could use the clout that he had after Silence of the Lambs to get a movie like Philadelphia made. That's how he chose to wield his power. Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, also two men that have been active in politics or activism in some way, shape, or form. By being in that movie, they are, in a way, look, they're being political even though they're entertaining you. And I think all of us should be involved in the world politically. But I understand what you're saying. Scott K sent in a tip saying Dune is also my most anticipated movie as well. I wish Star Wars, as some of the Legends material did, leaned more into the fantasy elements again, giving me nobles, knights, and warfare set in a sci-fi fantasy universe any day, and I'm in. Scott, I totally agree with you. That's one of the great things about Dune is it does have castles, and it does have nobles and great houses and fiefdoms and all kinds of things, and it's got great science fiction, and you're also dealing with human life and expanding consciousness and what does existence mean and prophecies, and I love all that. I mean, Dune is almost science fantasy, but not really, because one of the most fascinating things about, say, like Arrakis, the way it's presented in the book Dune, the way that Planet Dune is presented is Frank Herbert loves ecology. So the ecosystem that's presented is very, very interesting. There's really good stuff there, and I that's one of the things I loved about the book. Vermithrax Maru sent in a super chat. So, first ever super chat. Well, Vermithrax, first of all, I love your name. Of course, Vermithrax pejorative. That was the dragon in Dragon Slayer. ILM's beautiful Go Motion Dragon Slayer. So Vermithrax Maru, I love that. First ever super chat. I just wanted to say hello. I finished watching your Saturday show and was happy to hear you mention Dragon Slayer, Excalibur, and Krull, movies I enjoyed from my youth. Hence your name. Well, I'm glad. One of the things that I love to talk about here on this show is with that the show is stream of consciousness. It's not, everyone's like, you should structure your show more like John Campea. And indeed, I probably should, but I kind of like I like if I pick topics and then kind of riffing from there. And a lot of people have said that they like that too. So I'm glad. I love Excalibur, and it was great. I've often talked with my friend Dave Hargrove, like where is the physical? Where's the disc? Why isn't Dragon Slayer? Why isn't there a 4K disc of that? Dragon Slayer, you'd think that with all of the fantasy that you can now get, that we get on TV, and you'd think that Dragon Slayer would be given a release, but it's Paramount, and I know they've been ailing and hemorrhaging money and all that, but it was nice to see. I think it's on Amazon. It might be on Amazon. It's either Amazon or Hulu. There is a beautiful letterbox transfer of Dragon Slayer. It's beautiful. So that was great to see. And, I don't think Krull is a great movie, but I do love Krull. The glaive, the weapon in Krull glaive, and I love the scene with the crystal and spider. Bad Robot sent in a super chat saying, is Popeye with Robin Williams an underrated film? Robert Altman directed an adaptation of Popeye with Robin Williams playing Popeye. Is it underrated? I don't know if it's underrated. I mean, I think it's a pretty good adaptation of the source material. I'm not a big fan of that movie, but maybe. Man, I haven't seen that movie in ages. I saw it when it first came out, and I was like, eh. But I wouldn't mind seeing that again. That's another Paramount movie. Where is that? Where's the 4K version of Popeye? Is that on Blu-ray? It's a good question. Maybe I'll have to get it. Jedi Knight and friend to Alita sent in a super chat. Really disappointed that Alita didn't even get a VFX nomination. I thought the VFX in Endgame were bad at times, like in the end battle. Any word on Alita 2? I have not heard anything about Alita 2. I thought some of the visual effects in Alita were great. They did, I thought, a fantastic job. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Alita. I bought the special edition 4K disc, which came with the 3D version. It's great 3D, by the way. I bought the whole thing. I'm a big fan of Alita. I hope they make an Alita 2. I think maybe we'll see an Alita 2. I don't know. I don't know, but if they are going to make it, I don't think they've announced one yet, but they could. Anthony Gonzalez sent in a tip and says, if you're on the stage this time next year at the Oscars for a victorious Tango Shalom, can I get a shout out? Well, Anthony, I can't promise anything. I think it's probably hard enough to remember anything when you're on stage at the Oscars. But I can try. I can only tell you that I will try. Stubble McShave tipped $3 and says, Rob, how many thousands of dollars will you spend on hot toys from Dune? Well, I would love to see Hot Toys from Dune. I don't know if they're going to make. Here's the thing. It was funny. They did make toys from the David Lynch version of Dune. They made action figures and vehicles and model kits, and I had they made the ornithopter, which is weird. I mean, I have to say I didn't like the design of maybe the spice harvester. In Dune, they have the vehicles are called they're called spice harvesters, and then there's a thing called a carryall when the ornithopters see worm sign, when they see evidence that worms are coming to the carryall or to the spice harvester. The carryall flies in, picks up the harvester from the desert floor, and carries it to safety. And I think that I want to see. I hope people make, if they're cool. Like we haven't seen anything, and I understand we're 10 months out, but I really would love to see any designs, and I'm sure we're going to get a trailer. We'll get a trailer in the summer movie season. We'll have a trailer drop. I'll bet you, if I were a betting man and somebody said, Rob, when do you think the first trailer for Dune will drop? I think it'll be in front of No Time to Die, beginning of April. That's kind of the kickoff. I know it's early, but the kickoff of, I would imagine, or maybe even a little later. But yeah, but I don't know if they make Hot Toys. I hope they do. I just don't see. I don't see. The one thing about Hot Toys is they want to make money, and a lot of the Hot Toys that they announce or things they make, they just don't sell because I don't know if Dune Hot Toys are going to be collector friendly, if that's what people want. Because obviously the Marvel characters and the Star Wars characters and the DC characters do the best because they lend themselves so well to action figures. I don't know. If they'll make Hot Toys from Dune. I hope they will. But they didn't make Blade Runner Hot Toys. I was really hoping that we'd get Blade Runners and replicants, and maybe somebody else will, but I don't know. Suthius sent in a super chat saying, I watched the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. Not sure what sorcery they got going on, but all of the archive photos and footage are sharp, colorful, and full of life. Well, Suthius, having worked on a lot of Disney DVDs and Disney projects in the early aughts, the Disney archives are amazing. The video footage, a lot of that stuff is shot on film. And they have they documented the incredible documentation. I loved, by the way, if you guys have Disney Plus and you haven't watched the Imagineering story, it's so good. Watch it. It's amazing. It's really good. Nay sent in a super chat saying, what happened to the Tintin 2 movie? That's a good question. I don't know. I do not know. Very good question. I don't know. Peter Jackson and Steven Spielberg are busy. I'd like to see Tintin 2. So I don't know. Bad Robot sent in another super chat. Saw Free Enterprise last night. Pretty funny. Did you not like directing? No, I love directing. What happened with Free Enterprise is it didn't make any money. And after I made Free Enterprise, I spent a year going on what I would call Evian meetings. Because at the time, I met with people all over town. I had an agent. I met with people all over town. I was very close. It was between me and someone else, me and the director. I almost directed Dude, Where's My Car? And Freddie got fingered. I was up to direct that. But, you go to these meetings and you realize Free Enterprise was a movie I co-wrote with Mark Altman, and whose new book, Nobody Does It Better, is coming out, an oral history of the James Bond franchise. I think it comes out this week, comes out tomorrow. It's a really good book. I read it. And, the movie came out and it made no money. And I fell into, after that, I fell into DVD producing special features and creating special features. And I'd love to get back into directing. It's been 20 years. I'd love to. We tried to make a sequel 10 years ago to Free Enterprise, but we lost our funding. And it's tough. That's why I edit films and produce films. But I'd love to direct again. So maybe I will. But I'm glad you like Free Enterprise. Journey's End sent in a super chat. Thank you for that super chat, Journey's End. Studios seem to only want to make Star Trek if it's turned into Star Trek flavored action schlock for the masses. Can Star Trek exist again as excellent sci-fi storytelling? What will it take? That is a great question. I think what it will take is you need people who are willing to see I think that the last 10 years of Star Trek have not been wildly successful. They expected Star Trek '09 to do a lot more than it was supposed to do, and they expected Into Darkness, which was far more expensive than it should have been. It was they wanted to push Star Trek in foreign markets because Star Trek has never done traditionally well foreign. And they spent a lot more money than I think they thought, and they didn't get the kind of return that they wanted. And Star Trek Beyond has been obviously widely reported to not have been very successful. And Star Trek Discovery is one of the most expensive television shows ever made. And Star Trek Picard is up there as well. And I think the problem is the current stewards of Star Trek, even with Michael Chabon, or however you pronounce his name, and Kirsten Beyer, who's a great Star Trek novelist and a huge fan, you can't make good Star Trek. You need somebody at the top with a vision. The problem, I think, with Star Trek now is it does not have the kind of showrunner that it needs. You need somebody... Look, whether you like Berman's era of Star Trek or not, Berman worked with Roddenberry developing Next Generation and understood what the show was supposed to be. And he decided on a format. I mean, what's amazing to me is I go back and I watch Deep Space Nine, and just go find any clip on YouTube of Deep Space Nine, and just the way it plays out, it's so much more entertaining, just scene by scene than anything. I keep waiting for scenes where I don't think I have yet to see a scene in modern Star Trek in the last 10 years where a scene between two characters that I love, where you can see a scene with like Jeffrey Combs as Weyoun doing something with another character, or just talking to Odo. There's a scene in one of the Deep Space Nine episodes where Odo and Weyoun are traveling, and Weyoun's been staring at Odo for 10 hours. Just that exchange, those characters are the actors. Everything, all Star Trek now is so bland. I don't, and the characters I should care about when I'm looking at Spock, all I can think of is that isn't Spock, and that's not Sarek, and I that isn't Harry Mudd. I mean, now it's so weird that Discovery has infected Picard in the sense that we see the Discovery version of the Enterprise right next to the Enterprise D, and I'm like, why would you do that? I mean, I understand, but that's wrong. We've seen the original Enterprise canonically existing with Captain Picard, and in it, not at the same time, but in the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations, it's such a weird, it's very weird. And I think what Star Trek needs to do is it needs to be reinvented, not by a production entity. Everybody's got their production entities, but whether it's Bad Robot or Secret Hideout, look at how many producers are on the show. I'd love to see a Star Trek show that has created by a couple people, and they're also the executive producers. What we need is a visionary, like a Noah Hawley, who's going to do Star Trek 4, the feature, but he came on and created whether like Fargo or Legion. We need a singular vision at the top, because the Star Trek we're getting now is diluted with ideas from all over the place, and they're looking to other things other than Star Trek itself. And it's such a strange, it's a very strange, hybridized show. It's kind of bizarre, and I don't like it. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, even with Star Trek 2, you came on and you had Nicholas Meyer come in and rewrite the script that existed and directed the film, and you got at least his version of it. And I thought it was that's why Star Trek 2 is good, because you're getting a singular vision from somebody, and I think that's That's important. Our man Ian Samuels has written in a letter I keep meaning to read, but I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to read it now. He writes in, Rob and fellow Robservationists, with the final season of the epically great Clone Wars coming soon, it seems the best time to look back at its start. When Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the animated series began, it was at the same time that we were getting the Star Wars prequel trilogy. As a result, we had an animated series that was better than the big budget movie. Oh my goodness, how times have changed. Oh wait. After Star Wars The Clone Wars, we got Rebels, Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars Rebels had good stories and good new characters, as well as some characters from Star Wars The Clone Wars making new appearances. But the animation was not as good as Star Wars The Clone Wars. Why? Then we got Resistance. And boy, did things go downhill. Star Wars Resistance told badly written stories featuring a pathetic lead character and animation that would look perfect in the late 1970s, but not today. It looks awful. So now the greatness of Star Wars The Clone Wars returns for a final season, and it still looks amazing. It still looks like we are getting even more great stories, which means there's even less reason why Star Wars Resistance is so bad. Looking forward to Star Wars The Clone Wars final season. Well, Ian, once again, thank you for writing in. You know, I don't necessarily disagree. I find it interesting. There's a lot of people, though, like John Campea, when I'm on his show, he's always talking about how he doesn't like the Clone Wars. I think a lot of people don't like the Clone Wars because necessarily of the character design. Or at first I was resistant to the Clone Wars, but then I actually started watching it, and I was really surprised at how good it was. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked even the 6th season, which I had bought the first 5 seasons of that big Clone Wars box set on Blu-ray. But then I finally picked up the 6th season, and I thought it was great. I loved it. And I don't know why, it's all about creators and what they're doing. Not everything is awesome as much as we might want it to be. Anonymous sent in a tip. Anonymous says, I agree. Trek today is either bland, and when it's not bland, it's manic. How about just a scene in Deep Space Nine of Rom talking to Quark about breakfast with the engineering crew? But my question is, what do you like better? Kundun or 7 years in Tibet? 7 years in Tibet or Kundun? 7 years in Tibet, what, had Brad Pitt in it? I liked Kundun a lot. I mean, Martin Scorsese talks a lot about, like, he was going to be a priest. So, believe it or not, the nature of spirituality and I think religion, I mean, it was interesting. We saw it in Silence. We saw it in Kundun. I prefer Kundun. Is it Kundun? Kundun? So I'd have to say Kundun. But again, because you're getting a auteur. I'm always about authorship. Let's see. When I get entertainment that I feel has real authorship behind it, that's when I like it the best, because I feel I'm getting ideas presented to me that there's thought put into them, and it means something, and I really do enjoy that. That I enjoy that best, I think, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, it's funny. I keep wanting to read a scene from this script. Should I read a scene from this script? Why not? So what's really interesting is I'll just talk about the script. I'm gonna read a scene because we've seen this scene. So in the David Lynch version of Dune, we see when the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayem, the Mother Gaius Helen Mohayem, played by Sean Phillips. Actually, let me call up and find out. I'm gonna see right now. So let's see. Why not? Why not do this? Okay, so Rebecca Ferguson, delightful, plays Lady Jessica, obviously. Paul Atreides is played by Timothy Chalamet. Zendaya, who she plays Chani, but she's not in the scene. And then, yes, Charlotte Rampling is Gaius. So in this scene, you've got Paul Atreides, you've got Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, and you have Charlotte Rampling as the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam. And she has come to test Paul Atreides. Now, this comes literally, this is page 4 of the script. Page 4. Paul is already dreaming of Chani and dreaming of a girl he's going to meet later on in the movie. But this is a famous scene. Don Coscarelli did a riff on this scene in Phantasm. So Jessica comes to get Paul and wakes him up and takes him to the library. This is a numbered script, which means it's production, which all the scenes are numbered. So this is scene 10 from the movie. This begins on page 4 of the script. Library. Jessica leads Paul into the library. Wooden shelves heavy with ancient books. Suspensor lights hover in the gloom. Paul is dressed in black with silver trim, a hint of military style. The green Atreides hawk emblazoned on his jacket. He is mystified about the purpose of this midnight awakening. He finds the Reverend Mother Mohiam, 75, waiting for them. She sits in a heavy wooden chair, her aged face ghostly against her black cloak. Her eyes glitter as she studies him. Jessica. The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam. She was my teacher... Mohiam. She was my teacher at the Bene Gesserit school. Now she is truthsayer to the Emperor himself. She curtsies and steps aside. Paul is astonished by this meekness in his mother. He studies the Reverend Mother. She takes the measure of him in turn, his stance, his stare. Reverend Mother Mohiam. Defiance in the eyes, like his father. To Jessica, leave us. Jessica turns to go, reluctant but obedient. She pauses. Paul, the test you're about to receive... Test? You must do everything the Reverend Mother tells you. Remember, you're a duke's son. She hurries out. Paul glares at the Reverend Mother. You dismiss my mother like a servant in her own house? Reverend Mother Mohiam. The Bene Gesserit exist to serve. Sit down. The command cracks like a whip, her voice suddenly more than human, compelling obedience irresistibly. This is the voice. Paul sits on the footstool, helpless to resist, shaken. Paul, you used the voice on me. She lifts a green metal cube, 6 inches tall, from the folds of her robes, sets it on the arms of her chair. One side opens into a black interior, which no light can illuminate. Reverend Mother Mohiam. Put your right hand in the box. Paul doesn't comply, defiant. Your mother bade you to obey me. The invocation of his mother moves him. Reluctantly, Paul puts his hand in the box. The old woman leans forward, placing her hand beside Paul's neck. The old woman leans forward, placing her hand beside Paul's neck. A glint of metal. He starts to turn his head. Stop! He freezes, breathing hard. We see a long, gleaming needle, rock steady in the old woman's hand, almost touching him. I hold at your hand the Gom Jabbar, a poison needle, instant death. This test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die. Paul stares at her incredulously. This is madness. If I call out, the guards will come. Your mother stands outside the door. Outside the door, Jessica stands with her back to the door like a sentry. No one will get past her. Jessica's face is taut with terror. Her son's life hangs in the balance. She begins to whisper the litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration. In the library, Paul stares at the Reverend Mother apprehensively. What's in the box? Reverend Mother. Pain. And suddenly he feels it, a tingling sensation in his fingers that make his breath catch. He hisses in pain. Outside the door, Jessica's voice shakes as she whispers the litany to herself. I will face my fear. I will let it pass over and through me. In the library, sweat beads on Paul's forehead as the pain grows into agony. Why are you doing this? Reverend Mother, to determine whether you're human. An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do? Paul moans through clenched teeth, his left hand balled into a white-knuckled fist, his arm trembling. Pain. Outside the door, Jessica closes her eyes. When it has passed, I will turn my inner eye to see its path. In the library, Paul trembles. The Gom Jabbar glints against his neck. The Reverend Mother's eyes burn into him. He's panting. Insert Paul's hand inside the box, like a hand in a bonfire, the skin blackening, splitting. Paul cries out involuntarily. The Reverend Mother hisses, "Silence!" Outside the door, Jessica's voice rises, and where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. In the library, Paul shudders in excruciating pain, locking his eyes with the old Reverend Mother, at the very edge of his endurance. Insert Paul's hand, crisp flesh falling from charred bones. Paul shuts his eyes. His mother opens in a silent scream. His mouth opens in a silent scream. Reverend Mother, enough! The pain cuts off at once. Paul's eyes snap open with a gasp. Outside the door, Jessica opens her eyes. "Only I will remain," she says. In the library, the Reverend Mother stares at Paul as he gasps in relief. Sweaty, breathing hard, she is shocked at herself. "No woman-child ever withstood so much. I must have wanted you to fail. Take your hand from the box, boy, and look at it." Reluctantly, Paul complies, sure he will see a ruined stump, but his hand is unmarked. He wiggles his fingers, amazed. Pain by nerve induction. We can't go around maiming potential humans. He stares at her, his curiosity overriding his anger. What is this test for? The Reverend Mother smiles, concealing the box in her robes. Like shifting sand through a screen, we sift people to find the humans. If you were unable to control your impulses like an animal, we could not let you live. You inherit too much power. Paul, because I'm a duke's son? Because you are Jessica's son. You have more than one birthright, boy. You've proven you can rule yourself. Now you must learn to rule others. It's something none of your ancestors learned. Paul, my father rules an entire planet. Reverend Mother, he's losing it. He's getting a far richer planet. He'll lose that one, too. Arrakis is a death trap, boy. The die is cast. So there you go. That scene was in the... sorry, I didn't do such a great job reading that, but that scene was in the David Lynch version. It's a very famous scene in Dune. There was also a riff on it done in the movie Phantasm, Don Coscarelli's Phantasm. So, there you go. But, I mean, I think that this movie is so unbelievably well cast that I can't wait for this movie. I really can't. I think it's going to be great. Calvin Bose sent in a letter, and I like this letter. Hi, Rob. I was watching a show about Netflix and streaming, and it got me thinking. I was thinking about one thing that I think is missing today on TV, and that one thing is community. What do I mean by that? It used to be you would come into work Monday morning, and everyone was talking about the latest SNL. When Roots was airing, it became a topic at work. Today, if Roots was airing and you came to work excited to discuss it with your colleagues, people would tell you don't talk about it because they haven't watched it yet. Think about it. Would the Who Shot JR or Who Killed Laura Palmer phenomenon have happened like it did back in the day in today's cultural climate? Don't get me wrong. I love that I have so many choices, but I do miss the sense of community knowing that the program you're watching is also simultaneously watched by millions of others at the same time. Calvin Bowles. Well, Calvin, you know, I agree with you, but I think that it's just we have hundreds of thousands of more choices. You know, back then when you talk about Roots, I mean, that was a long time ago. We're talking the 70s, brah. And Who Shot JR was 80s. And back then you only had NBC, CBS, and ABC, and then your indie channels and maybe PBS. So it was possible. There was much more of a collective. We only had certain choices, so everybody else was watching the same stuff. And I think that was where that water cooler show, the water cooler idea came from. But I do think that when there are streaming shows, people do talk about them. It's just that, you know, there's so many different choices. There's so many different shows to watch now that you never know. Like, I've been hearing a lot about Money Heist on Netflix, and I haven't watched Money Heist. And some people I was working with were telling me how great it was. And I haven't watched it yet, so there was no water cooler moment with Money Heist, unfortunately. So I think, but your point is well taken. I mean, I used to love when I was a kid when a James Bond movie would air. Every kid would watch the James Bond movie, and if their parents didn't let them stay up, they would watch it until they had to be put to bed. And you'd come to school the next day and talk about it. But now, now we have so many things going on, and I think that I think it's both good and bad. I mean, I understand what you mean by a sense of community. I love talking, but I feel that we kind of have that, like, even on YouTube. Look, when every episode of The Mandalorian aired, or when the new episode of Star Trek Picard airs, we talk about it, and we have this community here where people are, in fact, talking about those things. And I like that. I mean, I think that's I think it's a good thing. I think it's important. And we do, I mean, now we're making videos about it. You can comment about it. So I do think that it's not the same community, but I do think we have our communities just like moved online. And I think that's a pretty good thing. It's an evolution. But again, we might not have a water cooler community at work, but we certainly do have the YouTube community that we can go to, and you can watch various YouTubers and their takes on things. I mean, I certainly do. I watch Critical Drinker. I watch Dave Cullen. I'll watch Midnight's Edge, or I'll watch Doomcock, or I'll watch any of these guys and girls and see what people have to say. I have one of my favorite YouTubers, probably because I have a crush on her, Impression Blend. She does a lot of reviews of books, and I love that. She's out of Chicago, and I love hearing her take on things. And she's also Russian. And I'll tell you something, interestingly, our movie Skyfighter, I guess Lucas Kendall, the director, was contacted by somebody in Russia, and they took Skyfighter, and Lucas sent them the sound stems, and they actually dubbed it into Russian. So you can watch a version of Skyfighter on YouTube that's in Russian, which I just love. But I think that's the great thing about this YouTube. The whole thing is that there is definitely a genre community, whether it's the movie pundit community. I'm sort of on that side as well, whether it's the John Campea side or the fandom side or Screen Junkies, or there's so many different. I watch a lot of Chris Stuckman. I like his reviews. I watch Red Letter Media. And when you come to these live chats and start to meet people, I mean, one of the things that we built here with the Post-Geek Singularity community is our community. All of you imagination connoisseurs who are watching these shows. And that's what makes it, I think, great. That's what I really like that. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, "Careful, Rob. I fear if you keep reading scenes off the page from Dune, Denis is going to have some of those Daft Punk Romulans beam into the Robservatory to disintegrate you. You're going to need Gilbert of the planet Gilbar nearby." Yes, I haven't let Gilbar and Tallulah into the Robservatory during shows. They just get too rambunctious, which is bad. What can you do? But yes, you know what? I've read that scene because you've seen that scene. This is the third time you're going to see it, but it's an important scene. It's one of those, the whole memorable fears the mind killer and all that. It was good. I mean, I liked the interaction. In the original Dune, you meet the Reverend Mother, the Sean Phillips version. You meet her with the Padishah Emperor when the Spacing Guild shows up with that guild navigator, who basically calls the Emperor out, like, "Come on, dude, don't mess this up because we need the spice to flow. The spice must flow." But yeah, I by the way, don't even ask me. Everybody's already asked me for the script. I don't give out scripts. I didn't give out the Rise of Skywalker script. I don't give out the Dune script. I just won't. And everyone's like, "I'll trade you for this." I'm not gonna give it out. I won't. I have a vast repository of screenplays that go back years. It's funny when like John Spate's Alien Engineers draft that I really liked. But I won't give that. I won't give it out. Anyway, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings me to an end of Robservations episode number 335. Unbelievable, 335. I want to thank everybody for their support. Please, if you like these chats, hit like, subscribe, hit the button, notifications button, so you know when I'm going to go on. I've been trying to keep it at 1 o'clock. That's when I kind of like to go on. I've just had so much work trying to keep up with everything. But please, if you like these chats, it's always helpful if you give it a like or subscribe. And I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chat. And also, you can write letters to me. I will start catching up. I got a backlog of letters, but still send them. You can also send me videos if you want. and I will play them. I haven't received any videos. I got a few videos, but haven't received any more. But send them to me, and yeah, that'll be great. I want to thank my moderating staff, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, who's been slammed. He's had lots of political stuff happening in his hometown that he's the mayor of. And then I also want to thank Detective Jim Boyers. He knows if you've been bad or good. By the way, he was a former detective and cop. So, yeah. Cardinal Sin just sent in a super chat. Said I read 2 letters today. Yeah, I still read letters. I've got a backlog that I have to delve into. And no, I read 2 today, and then I'll get back to reading more and more letters. I know everybody wants me to read them. So yes, I absolutely read letters. But yeah, I read one from Calvin Bowles and one from Ian Samuels. By the way, Ian Samuels, you should check out his column on Doctor Who. He's got his Who View on the Burnettwork.net website. I also want to thank, by the way, my other moderators, Greg Smith, of course, Lewis Yu, and Jordy Lyons. And it's great to have that great moderating staff that makes the community what it is. And it's great to have you all here. I will then bring this chat to an end. Robservations number 335 comes to an end. And all of you imagination connoisseurs, all of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, make this what it is. And I very much appreciate that. And let's see, shall I go out to the way I used to be? I mean, anyway. So thanks very much. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day.